Well, you guys, welcome to the Connection Pointe Worldview Podcast. It's a podcast designed to go deeper for you as a parent or guardian into places your students already gone. I'm here as always with Dr. Zach Brightenbach. Hello, Zach.
Hello.
And Pastor Trey Shigley. Hello, Trey.
Howdy, Ron.
Hello. Zach and Trey make up our Worldview department at Connection Pointe in the Indianapolis area, and we're working our way through some material this week that I think is one, it's world-class, two, it is so rare to be able to have this sort of conversation, in particular with middle schoolers of all things, because recently you guys had Worldview Week where a bunch of middle schoolers gathered weekly for a whole week. You taught material on ethics, which is just one of those topics that is so deep and so important, covers a lot of different areas, but I don't think a lot of people wrestle with at the level that you guys were, especially on a student level.
And most of them were there voluntarily. So
that's I know there's still a little coercion for middle schoolers with their parents, but for the most part, for them to opt in, and then they were obviously doing a lot of fun stuff. You were doing amazing stuff with them in the afternoons and evenings and stuff too. But as we work our way through this material, this is part 2 in the series, and if you missed the first one, you can double back and listen to it. But in that first lesson, you discussed what ethics is and is not. You talked about why it's such an important topic. So, Dr. Zach, why don't you hit me with the goal of this second lesson?
Yeah, so in this one, we're going to start talking about ethical theories. So first we're going to talk about what an ethical theory is. I'll define that here in a second. And then we're going to get into the first of a few major ethical theories that we're going to kind of break down and give you an overview of, and that'll be utilitarianism, right? So that's utilitarian. That's a lot of syllables.
That's a lot
8
of
syllables. So that's going to impress people right there. That's just that you can use a word like that. So that's where we're headed. Ethical theories, basically throughout history, people have tried to figure out, well, what's the right thing to do? What's ethical? How do we know? And so that's what an ethical theory is. It's just a way of looking at ethics. It's trying to guide us in a certain way, offer us some kind of principle as to how we should be living. And so that's the point of today. And we're going to start off with this thing called utilitarianism.
Okay, so Trey, do you want to give us the basic idea of utilitarianism?
Yes. It's a long name, but it's a pretty simple idea.
Okay.
This is why we're I think middle schoolers can get this.
Yeah.
Essentially, it boils down to that the right thing to do is whatever brings the most happiness to the most people.
Okay.
So
this is a perspective. This is not what you're proposing.
Right.
Just to be clear.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. This is a ethical
a theory
we're looking at, and we'll eventually see how it falls short of. It might have some holes that the biblical worldview doesn't. But
got it.
The key point of utilitarianism is do whatever makes the most people happy. So don't just make yourself happy. You are thinking of others, and you're in a certain situation when you have a choice to make. What will make the most number of people the most happy? That's pretty much what it boils down to. Happiness is the kind of most important thing in life.
I can actually see how a lot of us do that just in general in a lot of cases. Yeah. So one challenge for this theory is defining happiness then. So tell us about Jeremy Bentham and how he defined happiness. Dr. Zach?
Yeah, it is hard to define happiness, and utilitarians have disagreed on that throughout history. And Jeremy Bentham was an early utilitarian. Was from England, lived in the 1700s to 1800s, and he defined happiness as being sort of sensual pleasures, physical pleasures, feeling good, right? Basically,
Okay.
So getting some delicious food, getting a nice massage. That sounds pretty good for me right now. Hearing pleasant music, enjoying entertainment, pleasant smells.
Yeah.
Something I would know nothing about. Born without a sense of smell, but that would count.
You're kidding. How did we miss how we've known each other these many years? And
yeah, I'm risking a lot by putting this on the internet because you tend to get pranked sometimes when you tell people you can't smell.
Wow.
But that most people, that would apply to them as part of sensual pleasures, just not people like me. Sex, enjoying entertainment, all these things, anything that you can feel physically good would count as happiness, according to Jeremy Bentham. And so he thought, the best action is always going to be the one that brings the most physical, sensual pleasure to the most people and causes the least pain. Right, physical.
Okay.
So that was what he focused on. Bentham, by the way, is this very interesting sort of character, as a lot of philosophers are. And I study philosophy, so I guess I can say that. I guess I'm an interesting character in a lot of ways. Trey could tell you.
Well, I wasn't going to say anything, but
I got my quirks, and I think a lot of philosophers do. But I mean, Jeremy Bentham. I made this point briefly with the middle schoolers. I think this might have been their favorite part of the week, But Bentham thought it would be a good idea to have his body preserved and put on display when he died, just so everyone could remember him, I guess, and see him and think about his ideas. So there's a display at the University College of London in England where his actual skeleton is dressed in his actual clothes. And, there's straw put in there to fill it out. And he wanted his mummified head to be put on top, but that didn't work out. The preservation of the head didn't work so well. It looks pretty nasty. You can actually see a picture of it online. Pretty gross. But, so he's an interesting character. Moving on from that, the little factoid about Jeremy Bentham. It was kind of criticized, some of his ideas about happiness focusing on physical, sensual pleasures because it ignored a lot of the deeper aspects of happiness. So sometimes it was called pig philosophy because people would say, well, according to this idea, a pig could have more value to their life than a human. If the pig is just perfectly happy, wallowing in the mud, has lots of food, and has all its physical pleasures met, and then you have a human who's even just slightly dissatisfied, you'd say, well, there's more value to the pig's life because they have more happiness in terms of physical pleasures. But that just doesn't seem right because humans have the ability to have these higher order pleasures that pigs could never experience, right? And so as we go on, we'll see how utilitarians expanded their view of happiness.
Yeah, so the utilitarians then try to improve this view of the pig philosophy to avoid being criticized for it, basically, and that leads to John Stuart Mill. So how did Mill try to improve upon the way Bentham defined happiness? Trey?
Yeah, he was a utilitarian as well. But he argued that happiness is more than just physical pleasure. So
did he leave his body behind?
No, he did not.
Thank goodness.
Okay,
no.
Good.
Pretty boring.
Plain Jane, John Stuart Mill. He's got to mix it up if he wants to be remembered more. But he said happiness is physical pleasure. Sure, that's a part of happiness, but happiness is more than just physical pleasure. And he said it's better to be a human being dissatisfied than a pig that is satisfied. And so he's kind of arguing directly against just the pure physical pleasure aspect. And so he says happiness also includes learning new things, being creative, loving music and art, building deep relationships, setting goals, and accomplishing those goals, becoming a better person, finding deep meaning in life. He's like, there's a lot more aspects of happiness, and we need to take all of those into account. And pretty much all of those things are things like a pig can't do. They're things, deeper levels and orders of happiness that a person can experience, and we have to take all of that into account when trying to decide how to produce the most happiness for the most amount of people in our decisions.
I heard once that the mission or vision statement of Disneyland, which I'm assuming is the same for Disney World or maybe all the Disney parks, but that Disney had was to make people happy. That was the whole, and you can kind of see it,
Yeah.
So then it makes me wonder if Disney was a utilitarian.
There you go.
But because everything there is kind of designed. sensual, I don't know so much sensual, but certainly like physical pleasure, the food that you eat and the, the
Visual
rides that you
pleasure,
go on, and it's beautiful to look at.
Excitement.
And there's a lot of good about being happy. I mean, there's certainly something we would all want to do, is be happy, ideally.
Right.
But as we go, we'll kind of see that maybe building your whole ethical theory around this one goal of maximizing happiness is going to run into some problems.
Right, and it's broader than just the sensual, and then maybe happiness isn't the ultimate goal. So, next you talk about how utilitarians try to calculate which option will produce the most happiness. So give us an idea how that works, using some examples, Dr. Zach.
Yeah, here's where ethics and math sort of come together. If you don't like math too much, this may not be the ethical theory you're going to gravitate towards, I suppose. But it's a simple rule, right? Maximize happiness for as many people as possible. But then the way that plays out is you have to sort of calculate this somehow, right? You're going to have a decision to make. You have different options. You're going to have to try to put some numbers to this and figure out, well, which option is going to create the most happiness when I consider everybody involved. So the first thing you do is you figure out who's involved, who's going to be affected by the decision that you have to make. You write out all those different people or groups of people. And then for each person or group, you're gonna add up the total happiness for that person, right? You're going to try to figure out, if I do this, how is that going to affect their happiness, either positively or negatively. Some utilitarians even had like units of measure. They often called hedons or dolars. Hedons is like a positive unit of happiness, and a dollar is a negative unit of happiness.
Like hedonism?
Yeah, that's where that came from, right?
Okay.
But I didn't get into that terminology with the students, but basically it's putting numbers to it, and then you're basically going to add it all up. You're going to see who's affected. You're going to put the numbers. You're going to add it up, and you look at each option, and you see, well, what causes the most happiness. And so sometimes an example makes it easier to see what this cashes out to.
Right.
So here's an example that we went through in the lesson. Imagine there's a kid who doesn't have a bike, and there's a kid who does. The kid who has the bike, we'll name him Bob, and Bob has rich parents, and he only uses his bike to ride around the neighborhood just for fun. He doesn't really need it for anything else. He just has a lot of fun with it. But then Joe is a kid who doesn't have a bike, and Joe has poor parents, and poor Joe gets made fun of a lot because he doesn't have a bike, and he really needs a bike, not just for fun, but to get to basketball. He wants to play basketball, and he can't be on the team because he has no transportation. He has no way to get there, let's imagine. So if he had a bike, he could go to practice and he could play on the basketball team. So Joe is a utilitarian, and he's trying to decide whether he should steal Bob's bike and use it to have fun, to not get made fun of, and to be able to play basketball.
Mm-hmm. Okay, some reasons, some scores there.
He's got some reasons. So if he did that, if he stole the bike, he would lie, and he would just tell his parents that he found the bike. Right?
Okay.
So that's what he's trying to decide. So the first step would be, well, who is affected by this decision that Joe has to make? And so we had the kids, write down brainstorm who would be affected, and it'd be like Joe, obviously, Joe's parents, Bob, of course, and Bob's parents, and you could think, well, the basketball coach and team. We limited it kind of to that, but you could even imagine other people could be affected, like other kids in the neighborhood could be affected if they find out there's theft going on in the neighborhood. And sometimes it goes beyond what you even think, but we'll just kind of limit it to the ones I listed. And so then for each of those, you're gonna try to estimate, well, how happy or unhappy would they be if Joe stole the bike or if he didn't, right? And so as you look at it, it seems like stealing the bike, according to Joe, would make him pretty happy, a lot happier than he is if he doesn't steal the bike. So maybe he gives himself like plus 50 points for getting to play basketball. That would make him pretty happy. And plus 50 for having less teasing from the kids. Plus 10 just for the fun and convenience of getting to go places around the neighborhood.
110.
And he's up to 110. Maybe he says, I'll subtract 10 because I might feel a little bit guilty and I might be a little nervous. My parents will find out.
Okay.
I don't think they're going to find out.
Yeah.
Of course, you know, with utilitarianism, you don't always know how to calculate because you don't know if they're going to find out or not. That's a big factor, right? But
variables.
you have to guess
Yeah.
on that. Maybe he says it's about 100 for him, you know, in terms of happiness. And then he's thinking about, well, what about Bob, the kid who has the bike?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what would happen if I stole the bike from him? Well, he would be a little unhappy. He'd be more happy if I didn't steal the bike. He's doing fine, but he wouldn't be that unhappy if I stole it because he's a rich kid.
He's rich, he'll just get another.
He'll get another bike. So maybe minus 20 because he temporarily loses his bike. Minus 20 for, you know, he might be angry that someone stole his bike from him. And then maybe, though, plus 30 for him because he gets a new bike. He's probably going to get like something even newer and better from his rich parents. So Joe's like, I'd only put it at like a negative 10, you know, something like that. It's not that bad for Bob, really.
Yeah.
And then think about Bob's rich parents. Like, it's not that bad for them either. They might be a little angry. They have to buy a new bike. It's a minor inconvenience. They got a lot of money. And they get the pleasure of getting to give Bob a nice new bike and be the heroes in this story, right? So maybe like a total of negative 20 or something. It's not a big deal to Bob's parents. Joe's parents, you know, assuming they don't find out. Now, if they find out, this throws off the calculation, and they're going to be really unhappy, probably. You would hope so. But, you know, they get plus 40 for getting to see Joe play basketball, which they would love for him to be able to do. But maybe we'll subtract a few points because they could find out the truth just in case. So we'll just say like plus 20 for them, you know. And then, of course, Joe's basketball coaching team would love to have Joe on the team because he's a great basketball player, and they'd all be really thrilled about that. So like plus 40. So you add all this up, like plus 100 for Joe, plus 40 for Joe's parents. Just small minus 10 for Bob, minus 20 for Bob's parents, and a huge plus 40 for the basketball team that gets Joe on the team. It comes out to a plus 150 for Joe to steal the bike.
It. Wow.
So he steals it, right? He feels like people are going to be on the whole more happy, not just me, but like everyone, if I steal the bike. And so then we ask the students, well, what do you think about this, right? Just because going this route is going to make the most people the most happy, it's going to create the most happiness in the world. Does that justify it, right? Do you see any problems with this, right? Like, what about Bob's rights? What about justice?
Yeah.
Right? Doesn't he have the right not to have his bike stolen? Like, do the ends justify the means? Because with utilitarianism, of course, the ends always justify the means. The end is happiness, and as long as you got that, how you get there isn't necessarily that important, right? But is that the way it should be? Should you steal from is that okay to steal just because you feel like it's going to create the most happiness in the end? So it gets them thinking about some of the problems with utilitarianism that we're going to see down the line.
That's so interesting because it's like it sounds so ridiculous when you start to paint the picture that way with a point system and stuff, and yet I can think of so many times where, like, almost subconsciously, I'll roll this scenario out in my head. Well, it affects people, but maybe not that much, or maybe a whole. You know, I'm not assigning points or anything, but it's crazy
how
much.
Oh, they probably won't find out, so it's probably fine.
Yeah.
So you're like, oh, it won't have the negative happiness aspect, so it's probably okay.
Man. Well, then you guys proposed a thought experiment involving a happiness machine.
Yes.
Tell us about this imaginary machine and what it shows us about happiness and utilitarianism.
Yes. So you could imagine that there's this machine, the happiness machine, and you can voluntarily plug into it for the rest of your life.
Okay.
And it kind of puts you into this coma, and just in your mind, you just live out this perfectly happy,
like the Matrix. Eat steak and
just this happy life, right?
Okay.
And you can't get disconnected, but you live out your life just sitting there in a chair, and you're just kind of happy.
Okay.
I also think of like WALL-E, maybe.
Yes, exactly.
You're just sitting there, disconnected from reality, just kind of in their minds having all this happiness, and they're never unhappy again. Would you want to do that? And maybe some people would say yes, but I think a lot of people would have serious hesitations and would say, you know what, no, I wouldn't want to do that. And that kind of shows like that happiness is not the only thing that matters in life. And Christians shouldn't plug into the machine. They shouldn't want to plug into the machine because this life matters. We really believe what we do in this life matters. We want to affect other people in real life for their good and for the glory of God. So happiness is not the most important thing in life. Really, a relationship with God and with other people is more meaningful than just having your mind be satisfied with just happy things.
Well, do you think that chasing after happiness works? I mean, is that the best way to find happiness?
Yeah, it's like kind of paradoxical that the more you chase after happiness, where it's like you elevate happiness to be the ultimate thing in life, and that's what you base everything on and all your decisions, and you're just trying to be happy. And it seems like in a lot of cases, the more you seek for happiness, the less happy you actually are, right? And so the trick seems to be, if you just focus on what the Bible says, another teaser for where we're headed later in the series, focus on loving God, focus on loving other people, focus on making an eternal difference in people's lives. What you find out is when you focus on those things, happiness just comes along for the ride. You just end up being happier. But when you're so fixated on trying to be happy, it often eludes you. C.S. Lewis has a good quote about this, as he does about so many things. He says,
I was getting worried because we've gone a little bit without a C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, we got
like, is this even worldview?
I know we got to come back to it. But he says if you aim at heaven, and you'll get earth thrown in. If you aim at heaven, you'll get earth thrown in. But if you aim at earth, you're going to get neither. So in other words, you aim for God, you live for the things that really matter, then the joy, the fulfillment, the happiness tends to just follow along as a result. Lewis also says you can't get second things by putting them first. You get second things only by putting first things first. So when you prioritize what really matters, like God and other people, you'll find that you just end up more happy in the end. But those people that seek happiness is their goal in life often find out that they're not finding it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's kind of boil it down then. As an ethical theory, what do you think are the biggest strengths of utilitarianism, Trey?
Yeah, one thing to recognize when critiquing other worldviews is that you don't have to say it's all bad in order to be a critical thinker about it. You can admit, like, there are some good things in here that people have discovered because God gave them a reason, or a reason and a brain and the ability to think through things. So there are some really great things about utilitarianism. One is that it recognizes that consequences matter. We can't just think about the actions themselves, but we have to think about what are all the consequences that will come from this action, and it helps people think about what the results will be. We're not trying to go through life willy-nilly. Like, we need to think about consequences. It also considers others and not just yourself. So it does encourage selflessness. You want to think about the happiness not just of yourself, but of everyone involved. And that's a great thing. And as Christians, we should be concerned about that as well. We want to consider the good and even the happiness of the people around us. And then another one is that there's just one criteria, and there's just one factor, and it can be applied to lots of scenarios. So it's pretty simple, at least in its idea, right? We've seen, like, actually doing the math is just a lot of guesswork and can be tricky, but it's pretty simple. And another thing is that it promotes happiness. Again, that's not a bad thing.
Right.
I don't think God wants us to be unhappy all the time. Happiness is a good thing, but it's not the most important thing, but it is good. And it recognizes human value. It recognizes that that other people have value. It recognizes that, especially if you get away from kind of the pig philosophy, recognizes it's better to be a human in a kind of difficult world with its ups and downs than a pig who's just living out its life completely satisfied and happy. Being a human has value, and life matters.
Okay, so that's some of the strengths. What would you say, Zach, are some of the weaknesses of utilitarianism?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of weaknesses. You kind of got to see some of that in the example
Yeah.
that I gave, even though I could give other examples where it comes out pretty reasonable, where you
Right.
follow utilitarianism and you're like, oh, yeah, that seems like a good decision.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it can lead to evil actions and injustices. And I think you saw that in the example that we did. It's not just for this guy's bike to get stolen. That's just wrong. It's a wrong action, and it's not just. It's not fair. He has rights, regardless of the happiness that might be produced. A second thing would be it just ignores motives and character. It doesn't focus on virtues and being the right kind of person. It only focuses on outcomes. So you're not really inwardly focused on what kind of a person should I be and how do I develop these good character traits. It just focuses on what happens. It also doesn't really care why you did what you did, as long as it produces the right outcome and what your heart was like. Or
Right.
did you do it with a good heart? Who cares? Doesn't matter. A third negative is happiness is not the ultimate good. And so Trey kind of, with that thought experiment with the happiness machine, we can imagine that you could be totally happy and everyone in the world could be connected to the happiness machine and everyone's totally happy, and we wouldn't necessarily think that that's a good thing, that's the ultimate good. But this theory assumes it is the ultimate good.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is based around happiness. It treats it like the ultimate thing in life, but it doesn't seem, even though it is a good thing, like that trumps everything else, especially if Christianity is true. We should have a lot of other things that we would prioritize, even though I think Christianity leads to ultimate happiness in the end. A fourth negative is happiness is hard to measure and predict. Like, would Joe's parents find out? You think not, but what if they do? Right?
Yeah,
It throws
right.
off your calculation.
Right.
It can be kind of hard to guess sometimes how happy or unhappy someone is going to be. I thought they weren't going to be that unhappy. Well, it turns out they are.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, there's a lot of guesswork that goes into it.
It's interesting that your happiness too would be predicated on someone else's unhappiness.
Mm-hmm.
It could be
And
sometimes.
how it factors in,
Not always.
Not always,
yeah,
but
in that case,
Bob
right?
and Joe and
Yeah.
I'm going to be happy, but Bob won't be, or
Yeah.
whatever,
And it could be the reverse, even with utilitarianism. Someone else you might think would be totally happy, but you would be a little bit unhappy, and you think, well, that's why you should do it.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe your guesses are wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just very hard to know.
Interesting.
And then a fifth criticism of utilitarianism is it's just very demanding, right? When you think about it, it calls you to always do the thing that's going to create the most happiness for the most people.
Mm.
That means you should probably never go on vacation.
Yeah.
You should never go to the movies. You should never play video games. You could always be doing something better with those resources and time to create more happiness in the world than to do the vacation or whatever. I mean, it becomes very, very hard when you think about it to live that out consistently. And you're going to feel guilty. There's going to be a lot of guilt that you feel all the time because it's hard to always do the thing that's going to create the greatest happiness for the most people, even though in some ways that's a high calling to do.
Yeah.
So those are some of the criticisms. And in the end, we just for those reasons and others we didn't get to, it's not a good system to guide us morally. This is probably not the theory you want to base your whole moral framework around.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it's good, guys. As we wrap up, what's a good question that parents might ask their students to have a good discussion about this lesson?
Yeah, I think a great one would be, what do you think could go wrong if people made moral decisions just based on whatever seems to make the most people happy? So you're essentially asking, hey, what could go wrong with this theory?
Yeah.
And I think that could bring up some great discussion in the car or at the dinner table or wherever you're at.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, I appreciate you guys so much, and diving in on this is a real treat. So thank you. Parents, we're praying for you. We're praying for your students, as always. If you need something, head to connectionpointe.org. That's point with an E, connectionpointe.org. Click on the Worldview tab, and you can connect with us that way. God bless you guys. We love you so much.